Hello and welcome to this video cast for subscribers to davidicke.com. Last week I was talking about something I've been writing about for a long time, what I refer to as the technologically generated sub-reality. And what I mean by that is a energetic field. You could think of it as a massive global cloud that is operating within the frequency band of human energetic mind and brain activity. And therefore, because of the frequency compatibility, that information source, that technologically generated information source, can be attached, connected to human thought and emotional processes, and thus feed information into the human individual and collective mind that dictates perceptions, thoughts, and emotions. Now, I know at first hearing, people will find that fantastic and ridiculous and, what else is on? But it's true. And I've been researching this a very long time. And to understand the depth of the human control system and where it is planned to go through what we call the transhumanist agenda, you have to open your mind to many things, and you have to go deep into the realms of the nature of reality. And this week I've had a long email from a gentleman called Dante Kalidas. And what he's saying here is that he has personal experience, personal knowledge of the sort of thing I'm talking about, although he gives it a different name. And I'll just read you some of the information from the email so you can see how in context it is with what I've been saying all these years about this technologically generated sub-reality designed to become the reality perception source of the human individual and collective mind. He says that he's already tried to get this out through the alternative media, but no one has touched it. And he says, so AI, artificial intelligence, and what I know and how I know it. I speak of the government's New World Order putting an astral net in place, David, for monitoring the masses all across the world. Now, that's a very good description of it, what I'm talking about with this technologically generated sub-reality, an astral net. Because for those who haven't come across the term astral, it is a term for a level of energetic reality that is beyond human sight, which is not saying much because, as I've pointed out many times, if you take what mainstream science says about the reality that we can actually visually experience, then the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005%, some say a bit more but not much, of what mainstream science says exists in the entirety of what we call existence. Actually, it's far bigger than that. And therefore the frequency band of the electromagnetic spectrum is far smaller than even they're saying in relation to what actually exists. But when you think of that, 0.005% of what exists is the electromagnetic spectrum. This is mainstream science. And visible light, what science calls visible light, which is the only frequency band that we can decode into a reality we can see, is a fraction of the 0.005%. Now, when you consider those almost laughable um, statistics in relation to what we can perceive, then you can see that almost everything that exists in existence we can't see. But there are other levels which technology can pick up that are also affecting our perceptions of reality and our thoughts and emotions. Because, okay, I'm thinking now, okay? You can see the outward expression of those thoughts in my opinions. But what about the activity of thought? I'm thinking now. So, can you see what I'm thinking? No. Because that activity, that energetic activity, that electrical activity, is taking place on another level beyond human sight, where almost everything goes on. So this astral level is another level of reality that is beyond what we call the physical world. But because as I went into last week, the body is a holographic projection, like the whole of this reality we're experiencing, of energetic fields. It's at the energetic field level beyond human sight. Some people call it the auric field, but that's just one level of it. It's at that level that you can access the thought and emotional processes, which then become human perception and behavior. And this astral level is part of that energetic field beyond human sight. And so, through that astral level, you can access, on an energetic level, the human thought and emotional processes, and you can feed into those thought and emotional processes those thoughts and emotional responses that you choose. And if you do that, you are dictating the thoughts, perceptions, and emotions of either the individual you're targeting or a whole race of people, the whole human race, eventually. And thus you are controlling everyone and everything through that means. So this email goes on about the astral net. Think Minority Report, says the film, and you start to get the picture. Of course, the film is very off, as this will involve remote neuro monitoring and artificial intelligence, which is already used in conjunction with remote neural monitoring, or RNM. To begin with, what is commonly known as remote neural monitoring involves artificial intelligence. He goes on, Google stock is way up. You might remember in last week's video cast and in my books, I emphasize the absolutely crucial foundation role in all of this, the whole transhumanist agenda of Google. Google stock, he says, is way up because anyone on the inside knows that they are developing artificial intelligence and it is the future. If you are thinking longer than 20 years, people are thinking, that kind of period, well, it's way off, he says. And my estimate is based on how long this has been tested and obvious plans for the elite. Google will be huge. Anyone on the inside knows this. It is the future. The stocks are high priced for Google. And he goes on. There are thousands upon thousands of people dealing with remote neural monitoring across the world, thus an international agreement and conspiracy. Then we ask, why? It is about mapping people's brainwaves, all of their thoughts and thinkings and feelings, a myriad of things here. It is all being collected by agents and agencies across the world. And with this technology and going into a central database. For what purpose? The fact that all peoples across the spectrum are being attacked and affected with this technology points to a collection of a wide spectrum of information in regards to thoughts and feelings of people, and all across the board and all across the world. They are collecting all possible thoughts and feelings, cataloguing these, and each of these has a numeric print number, which with this technology can be used for duplicating said feelings and thoughts. The numeric value given to these are identity prints for reduplicating with this technology and for knowing what is being viewed in the first place. And behind all of it, artificial intelligence does all of the organizing and work in regards to identifying what is being thought and felt. So in the simplest terms, you download thoughts and feelings, all of which have a particular frequency, and then you feed those frequencies back to the population, thus stimulating those same thoughts and emotions, and thus dictating the behavior and perceptions of the population. Because, as I have outlined in the books and did so in the video cast last week, that we are living in a holographic simulation, a holographic version of a, if you like, computer simulation, computer game, interactive, then these computer terms become very, very relevant to what is going on and how it's being done. The email says the elite want to set up a net, national security agency in one sense, on an astral level. The elite have every intention of doing this, and sooner than you think. Actually, it's already going on and being built and expanded. Everything in regards to cell phones, smart televisions, pharmaceuticals, etc., is all the smaller stuff and a distraction. This has to be the case because they already can control and manipulate human consciousness, dreams, thoughts, and feelings with remote neural monitoring. And, you know, I've talked, as I did last week, about anything with smart in front of it is designed to communicate with everything else with smart in front of it, smart meters, smart TVs, smart phones, etc. But that is one level of it. It's not the actual core. The core of it is designed to be this cloud or this astral net, this technologically generated sub-reality of which these smart technologies are a part, but they're not it. They're a part of it, that's all. So deep does it go. So the question is, when does remote neural monitoring, RNM, stop being tested on individuals and implemented on a wide scale and for population control? Well, it's moving in that direction all the time. Thought is energy and astral. So will be this monitoring and control. It is the real level and intended goal. National Security Agency is a smokescreen and outdated to leave the public a step behind. Very interesting point. You know, all this stuff with the Snowden revelations and so many other revelations about the surveillance programs of the National Security Agency in the United States, not just in the United States, but globally. That is true, yes, but it's a smokescreen, as the writer points out, because, and in the sense of, it's pulling people into a much lower understanding and perception of the scale of human surveillance and control. So you get pulled into the level that this is about surveillance, monitoring the internet, monitoring the emails, monitoring phone. Yes, it is, absolutely. But that's just small deal in terms of the kind of stuff that I'm talking about and Dante is talking about here. in relation to the control and the dictating through the means I'm talking about of human thought, emotion, and thus behavior. He goes on that this is the ultimate reality in regards to controlling consciousness, absolutely, and consciousness of the masses. Artificial intelligence will be behind it all. A global AI network in which every person is hacked and spied upon, absolutely right, and even manipulated with this technology if need be, very much like the Matrix. Perhaps that is the real story behind the film. So to jump ahead for a moment, he says, this is for a world government, as it's all centralized and across all countries. So what is the government doing? What the government's doing is trying to set up a net in regards to controlling and monitoring people, and on an astral level, a thought level. They are quite literally preparing for a net in the future, and not too far away either, as he points out. In fact, I think some of it already exists, in which people are monitored by their thoughts and feelings, which is, and with this technology and for control, they are instituting and centralizing a database in which AI will be monitoring everything. Think of the machines in the Matrix movies. It will be monitoring the airwaves of people's thoughts. Thus, films like Minority Report have a seed of truth to them, so does The Matrix for that matter. But as with what I've just said about the National Security Agency surveillance, Minority Report is actually just small deal compared with the level of control and perception dictatorship that we're talking about. He says that RNM, remote neural monitoring, is a smaller compartmentalized part of the bigger picture. Governments have given this technology to agents all over the world, are experimenting with people for collecting a database on all possibilities in regards to thoughts, feelings, you name it. It is all being documented and categorized, and at the end of the day, all this info is being centralized. It is field testing and a collecting of data for a database involving AI, and a numerical values being assigned to a particular thoughts and feelings are all being catalogued for a world database for a collective world net. He goes on that it's all being done now for the future, and it has been going on for a very long time. In fact, this has all increased over the years. Absolutely, it has. He actually talks about a particular agent in Germany, who he says is out of control, an egotistical psychopath, a miniature version of the elite who's been given access to use this technology, and being done in a very, very horrific manner. And he goes on, people in the alternative media do not begin to see the end goal here, as they do not spend any real time thinking about this, and because their lives are not directly affected by this technology. My life and my family's is another story. And, you know, this is what I was also saying in the video cast last week, that if the alternative media is going to understand the depth and scale of what's going on, thus what we need to do to turn it around, then they've got to open their minds big time to things beyond their current belief system. And he goes on to say this: agencies murder public figures with this technology. I call this emotional engineering. Agencies and the elite are monitoring the masses as a whole, monitoring group consciousness when they do these events. The difference in stock prices, sales of newspapers, you name it, they are monitoring the effects of MK Ultra being done on a large scale. A large shock and trauma is being done to the world population, and the subsequent results and impact. Now, I've written in the books over the years about a document which came to light detailing, well, it was basically a a manual for people within this network who are being shown and taught how to mass manipulate and mind control the population. It goes under the name of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. And in that document, it actually describes how they are constantly creating shocks in the world, be they wars or economic shocks like the crash of 2008 and other things, and monitoring the reaction to them. Because it's very simple. If you can start to create a cause and effect understanding of data in a situation, an event, and what happens when you press enter, in effect, the human response collectively and individually, then you start to build up a deep understanding of, if you want a certain human response, what you have to do to glean that response, cause and effect. And he says they are monitoring the reaction of the masses using mathematics, signs, and waves, and for being able to fine-tune artificial intelligence in regards to manipulating populations and the masses. Interesting, he says here, an example, Robin Williams. Yes, the agents I deal with here were giving Robin Williams innuendos for a period of weeks. I wondered what it was all about, and then he died. And he says, when agents with this technology hear about a murder that is going to be done with this technology, it creates a buzz throughout the agency grapevine amongst those within this illegal program who have this technology RNM. And he says he can prove this. Now, I'm not saying, because I don't know if that is true about Robin Williams, but what is certainly true is that if you can access the thought and emotional processes of someone, then you can dictate their mental and emotional state, and thus dictate the behavior that comes from that mental and emotional state. And if anyone, goes, oh, well, go back to sleep, because this is what is going on. I'm not saying it happened in his case. The email says that. But could it have happened? Absolutely right. It could have happened with this technology. And he says that this technology was used in the murder of, and is used in the murder of public media figures. Thus, witnesses dying of instant cancer before they go to court, and emotional engineering. And I got into specific events, he says, with this agent in Germany and her officers, so I know what the result is. My concern, he says, is that no one will recognize the danger here, and that no one will cover this subject. Well, I've certainly been trying to do that for a very long time, and I urge the alternative media to start looking in detail at this, because this is the agenda above all other agendas for human control, to directly control emotions, thoughts, and so behavior through this astral net, or technologically generated sub-reality that I've been talking about. Interestingly, this week, another story, this was on TruthStream Media, City Council votes to ban mind control weapon use against residents. And it goes on. It's hard to even guesstimate the number of people, not just in America, but around the world, who feel they're going to be targeted or are being targeted by space-age directed energy mind control weapons and gang-stalked by minions of governments and shady groups for scientific experiments and other seedy ends. The numbers are at least in the hundreds of thousands at this point. Every once in a while, a little piece of this trend rises to the surface and makes its way into the mainstream headlines. if even at a local level, as in the case with the recent news that the Richmond, California City Council has passed a resolution in support of the Space Preservation Act and the Space Preservation Treaty to permanently ban space-based weapons. And he quotes the San Jose Mercury News saying, few societal threats escape the watchful eye of the Richmond City Council, so it was no surprise Tuesday night that it voted its opposition to airborne weapons systems that have allegedly targeted residents with mind control technology. After a dozen professed victims told of pain suffered from chemtrails, particle beams and electromagnetic radiation, the council voted in favour of a Councilwoman Jovanka Beckles resolution in support of the Space Preservation Act and the Space Preservation Treaty to permanently ban space-based weapons. It goes on to point out that the Space Preservation Act of 2001, which was, of course, lost in the process of trying to bring it to law, was to reaffirm that it is the policy of the United States that activities in space should be devoted to peaceful purposes for the benefit of all mankind. The bill would have permanently banned all space-based weapons and the termination of testing and developing them. It further specified defined weapons, or specifically defined weapon, in part as a device capable of inflicting death or injury on or damaging or destroying a person via the use of land-based, sea-based or space-based systems using radiation, electromagnetic, psychotronic, sonic, laser and other energies directed at individual persons or targeted populations for the purpose of information war, mood management or mind control of such persons or populations. So this is now seeping slowly into parts of the mainstream, this understanding that actually people are being targeted by this technology, but what's being lost is the depth of it and the scale of it, certainly the potential scale of it, when we, if we allow it to happen, reach the point which we're talking about with this cloud or this astral net. And this article goes on. It further noted that this would include, this is the bill, it further noted that this would include exotic weapons systems, such as electronic, psychotronic or information weapons, chemtrails, high-altitude, ultra-low frequency weapons systems, plasma, electromagnetic, sonic or ultrasonic weapons, laser weapon systems, strategic, theater, tactical or extraterrestrial weapons, and chemical, biological, environmental, climate or tectonic weapons. Of course, the bill was never passed. But when you read that list of technology, all those different types of technology are actually capable of manipulating human perception and human health, and thus human perception. And they are all based, or most of them are based, on an understanding of reality that is well beyond anything that people understand in the public arena. What we are seeing, however, is the blatant expansion and perception implications of these lower levels of this astral net, technologically generated sub-reality. And that's the level of the smart technologies. This is an article in a British newspaper this week, headed "Why Smartphones Should Be Illegal for Under 16s," and it's based on some study that came out this week. The article goes on, barely a day goes by without another report pointing to how mobile phones are ruining our children's lives. The latest comes from the London School of Economics, which has established that mobile phones have a seriously detrimental effect on the performance of children aged 14 to 16, especially those from less advantaged backgrounds. In schools where Pupils are barred from using their phones during lessons. Results among 16-year-olds jumped by 6.4%. In the case of low achieving and poorer pupils, the improvement doubled. Goes on, society has a duty to shield young brains from adult experiences that they are either too immature to understand or which might have long-term developmental damage. They also need to be protected from information overload and all the emotional personality implications for what goes on through these smartphones and other smart technologies. It says, having seen the impacts smartphones have had not only on my own children or child, but on her peers too, I'm certain they are bad news. It's not just the way the non-stop stream of data creates a permanent distraction, constantly demanding their attention. What I've been talking about over the years, controlling the point of attention, thus the point of perception of everything. Or the fact that they stop children from interacting face to face. How many groups of teenagers do you see in parks, hunched over their phones, nominally together, yet lost in their own separate worlds? And so all the frickin' time. What most horrifies me is the way smartphones take normal, healthy children and turn them into zombies whose principal preoccupations are not schoolwork, riding a bike, or even following the latest chart toppers, but checking how many likes their Instagram picture has amassed, or whether their latest video has amassed sufficient comment. In other words, the common theme here in relation to smartphones and these technologies is the manipulation and changing of personality and perception. And if you go deeper into it, and I have in one of the video casts and the books, scientific research has shown that these technologies are actually rewiring the brain. And social media, used as it is by so many in the way they use it, is also rewiring the brain so that people's attention span is smaller and smaller and smaller because the brain and mind processes get addicted to constant stimulation. This is why, again, as I think I talked about last week, studies have shown that the attention span of humans is now coming down in so many cases to the level of a goldfish, just a few seconds. It says, this article, at a time when young minds should be questioning and expanding, their horizons shrink to one tiny glowing screen. Forget great art, travel, conversation. That all they want to know is what's the Wi-Fi code and where can I get the best signal. Again, it's creating a myopia of a point of attention. So all that's going on here, not just beyond human sight, but within human sight, if you care to look, is all lost. It's like going round with blinkers on. All you can see is ding, 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 ding. There are physical effects too, the article says. Late nights spent texting instead of sleeping, as the constant stream of inanities keep them awake. Sore necks and bad posture as they hunch over their screens. They become fat through sheer inertia. Insensitive children, and what teenager isn't, quite rightly, the article asks, smartphones create untold anxiety. Do I have enough followers? Why has she got more friends than me? And the article goes on to call for these technologies, these smartphones, to be age restricted so that we would see the benefits to the next generation that would not just be academic but physical and psychological too. They'd sleep more, exercise more, bitch less, spend more time in the real world, whatever that is, and have a better chance of growing up as rounded human beings. The article points out that there are of course limits to what you can do by just banning phones in under 16s, but she says, Lord knows, we have to start somewhere. Well, the whole point that I'm making here is that wherever you look now, there are blatant attempts, there are blatant systems and processes in place to manipulate human perception and thus human behavior like never before. Another article this week in a national newspaper: playing video games could lead to dementia in later life. Same theme. Children who spend hours playing video games could be at higher risk of Alzheimer's and other brain diseases in later life, experts warned. Alarming research shows that those who play action games such as Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty use a different part of the brain to others when they have to navigate in real life. Exactly, it's rewiring the way we interact with reality. There are fears this will lead to shrinkage in the part of the brain that is involved in memory forming, making a host of brain diseases more likely. And this area they're talking about is one of the first areas to be destroyed by Alzheimer's. It is estimated the average child will clock up nearly 10,000 hours playing video games by the time he reaches 21, and that globally 3 billion hours a week are spent in front of video screens. Researchers asked men and women in their late teens and early 20s to play the game, and they got their research from that. Writing in the journal Proceedings of the Royal Society, the Canadian researchers said reduced grey matter in that area of the brain that is affected by this has been associated with an increased risk of numerous neurological and psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and Alzheimer's disease. So there we go. That's the sort of thing that is going on all the time within this emerging astral net. Then we have the input, because like I said last week, the human body is a biological computer, and what you introduce to that computer affects the computer, just as the one behind me is affected by the information that's put into it and downloaded into it. And this week we have a story relating to medication and what that is doing to the body. Now, of course, the pharmaceutical cartel, known as Big Pharma, is fundamental to this perception manipulation that I'm talking about. I mean, you look at all the drugs that people take, not even for mental and emotional reasons, that affect them mentally and emotionally, because the body on one level is a chemical electrical organism, and thus if you manipulate or change that chemical electronic balance or state, you affect the body and the way it operates. And of course, part of what the body does, fundamental what the body does, is it runs the processes of thought and emotion. So if you can manipulate that electrochemical state in a way that affects those thoughts and emotions, and these people know how to do that, then it's another way of dictating human behavior. And of course, vaccines are classic, but it's not only vaccines as a way of getting into the body and doing this mayhem. And this article is headed, Biggest Cause of Allergy Deaths, Pharmaceuticals. Although food allergies have garnered a lot of attention lately, it says, a new study reports that medications are actually the biggest cause of sudden deaths related to allergy. Over a little more than a decade, nearly 60% of the allergy-related deaths were caused by medications, while less than 7% were caused by food allergies, the study found. Medications can be dangerous, said study researcher Dr. Elena Jershko. director of the Drug Allergy Center at the Montefiore Medical Center and assistant professor of medicine at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City. The study was published online in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology. The most common cause it found of death through allergy was medication, which was implicated in nearly 59% of the deaths. About 19% of death certificates do not specifically specify a cause. Food accounted for just under 7% of deaths. Another 15% of deaths were due to venom from an insect bite or sting, according to the study. The drug that caused the reaction wasn't identified in 75% of the deaths. When the responsible drug was identified, it was an antibiotic in 40% of the cases. These have been handing out like confetti now, of course. And the next most common allergy-inducing drugs were radio contrast agents, which are used during diagnostic imaging tests, which again are, particularly in places like America, are like 2 a penny these days. And then these were followed in their impact by chemotherapy medications to treat cancer. From 1999 to 2010, the number of fatal drug reactions nearly doubled, according to the researchers. So that's another way, when you add to all the other things I'm talking about, that the system gains access to the body computer and thus has the means to mutate it genetically, to manipulate its thoughts and emotional processes, and to cause physical damage and death. Now, I'll say again, what is introduced into the biological computer body affects the biological computer body, cause and effect. And it doesn't take a lot of observation, especially from someone like me who was born in the 1950s, saw what life was like then, what people were like then, to see that people have changed in the way they think and feel to a vast extent, but also they've physically changed in the sense that the obesity epidemic worldwide was not what it is today, to say the least. I mean, obesity was so rare in those days compared with now. It's unbelievable. And what is happening? What you introduce into the body is what we bravely call food, impacts upon the body. It mutates the body. And this obesity epidemic worldwide is actually an expression of a mutation. And that mutation is then passed on to the children, which gives them a greater chance, far greater potential to actually follow the genetic traits, i.e. obese traits, of the parents. And it's an article, again this week, headed Children's Obesity Time Bomb. National Health Service chief warns parents over raised cancer and diabetes risk. And of course, diabetes is, the numbers are going through the roof. And the article says, British children are facing a rising tide of avoidable cancer, heart disease and diabetes linked to their weight, according to the head of NHS England. Simon Stevens warned that obesity is becoming normal, yes, in so many ways and areas, with millions of parents not even aware that their sons and daughters are seriously overweight, because a new norm is being created. He said that unless the government and responsible adults take action to prevent ill health, taxes will have to rise to fund the ever-growing costs of care. Another thing I've been pointing out over the years about the National Health Service, and indeed, the American Health Service in its private sense, though NHS is becoming more and more private, it's also applicable there, and wherever else you look. You're always going to have money chasing cost within a health service unless you go into preventative measures that stop the disease and the ill health manifesting in the first place. Because if all your health service is a fire brigade responding to when things have gone wrong, well, things, especially in the world we have now, of food, of drink, of stress, of this electromagnetic pollution that we have, this radiation outpouring in the last 50 years, all you're going to have is more and more disease. So you're going to have to spend more and more money trying to react to that disease, but you never will, because the disease goes on increasing. And they call it, they say people are living longer, but they're not living longer, most of them. They're existing longer because of their health being kept alive. Because, their health is so bad that without all this other stuff that is keeping them alive, they wouldn't be. The idea is to be alive because you are alive, not because you are kept existing by external means, like, all these bloody drugs and stuff. And so the guy's absolutely right. Unless we start changing the way people, or people choose to start changing the way they live, but not only that, that the system starts to insist on proper food, unpolluted food, non-toxic food, non-genetically modified food, and drink and water, then this is just going to go on and on and on. Why? Because it is part of the agenda for the mutation of the human race and for the sorry, coming up on my screen, the mutation of the human race and for the dictation of emotional and mental processes. So he says, this is Mr. Stevens, the NHS chief, as a nation, it's time to get our act together on prevention. In fact, globally it is. Junk food, sugary fizzy drinks, and couch potato lifestyles are normalizing obesity. And as parents, a third of us can't now spot when our own child is seriously overweight. We've got a choice. Condemn our children to a rising tide of avoidable diabetes, cardiovascular disease and cancer, and burden taxpayers with an NHS bill far exceeding an extra $8 billion by 2020. Or take wide-ranging action as families, as the health service, as government, as industry. It's a no-brainer. Pull out all the stops on prevention or face the music. Yes, absolutely, but it's not going to happen from the point of view of being generated by government and all that comes out of government, because this is actually what they want to happen. Not everyone in government, but I mean that core behind government that dictates government policy. Have you noticed that when you have a thing involving a problem like obesity, they point at everybody, the person who's obese, and what goes on around them. But very rarely, certainly governments, do they point at the corporations that are producing the crap that is so fundamental in causing the obesity. Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to give you meat products from cattle and cows that have been fed growth hormones to get them fatter quicker to make more money. Oh, well, the growth hormones aren't passed on to you. Of course they are, you idiot. And so genetically modified food, which is genetically modifying those who eat it. It's being pushed by almost every government. You know, and manipulated into place. Look at what's going on in America. Genetically modified food is the norm. And that is obviously mutating, part of this mutating process. So he's not going to come from governments because that's what they want. Because, again, as another example, the supermarkets that I see around me, invariably, they don't have a place to put the trash, the rubbish from the packaging of the products bought at the supermarket. A supermarket up the road from me here, they had one little skip thing where you could put the stuff in one, but they've taken that away. And then if you look in the store, the packaging in one aisle is staggering. Much of it completely irrelevant to the product and targeted at what it looks like on the shelf. But people get fined for not getting rid of rubbish in the right way or not recycling rubbish in the right way. And yet, the system never turns, or very rarely, or here and there, but overwhelmingly never turns its attention to the supermarkets and those that produce for the supermarkets, reducing the outrageous packaging that creates this Everest of unnecessary rubbish. And everywhere you look, the blame for what is happening is put on the people suffering the consequences of what is happening rather than those that are actually creating it originally. And this is, again, all part of diverting people's attention away from what is really going on and where it's coming from. And this article goes on. Earlier this month, the World Health Organization warned that by 2030, 2/3 of women and 3/4 of men will be obese in the UK. And that is just one country. And, you know, you see these behavior situations all the time. As, I mean, people are, have said to me, well, so people are becoming zombies, well, not everyone is. A lot of people are waking up and moving into another level of reality and perception, but no doubt about it, the zombification of great tracts of the human race, I would suggest as a result of all that I've talked about today and more, is blatant to see. I mean, you see things like this, terror of the biker gangs after 9 die in battle over parking space, sinister truth about these ruthless tribes. And this is about these 2 biker gangs who went for each other big time in a Texas town, Waco, famous for obvious reasons, at a restaurant called the Twin Peaks. And it started apparently in a toilet over a parking space, and then bingo went from there. Cut one, we all bleed, said, is the motto of one of the gangs, the Bandidos, while the other gang, the Cossacks, say, we take care of our own. Well, you're morons, all right? Morons. Fighting over what? Because someone is in a different group of people to you. It's insanity. There are people in psychiatric hospitals all over the world for infinitely less than this kind of behaviour. Then there's this one. Again, the way perceptions have been manipulated to insanity is extraordinary. This is, I kid you not about this story. Wall Street bankers pay wives a bonus for managing their home. They're a relationship. We share the pot and all that stuff, and we do what we do within the relationship. Oh no, no, can't have that. Not in that world it is now. I'm not kidding you when I read this. I promise you. You may have thought that marriage was about partnership, teamwork, and a compromise, but it's a rather different story for the elite bankers who are using their businesses and business skills, rather, to manage their domestic affairs and paying their wives bonuses if they're happy with how they are running the home. See how constantly more and more robotic so many people are becoming, computer-like, because if you disconnect from an influence of the expanded consciousness, the infinite awareness that we really are, then you're left with the biological computer processes to process your sense of reality. You become a computer, you become a robot. In one gilded New York enclave, those who manage to get the children into their man's preferred school, as well as to keep a tight hold on the utilities budget, are rewarded with a lump sum of tens of thousands of pounds. The money is paid at the end of the year, just like the bonuses given to their husbands, who are usually Wall Street tycoons and hedge fund managers. Well, they're robots anyway. Absolutely addicted to the drug called money. According to a US author and sociologist, the wives blow the cash on clothes or tickets for charity events run by friends, which sell for as much as $10,000 a time. And this researcher spent 6 years studying around 100 mothers living in Manhattan's Upper East Side. And she said she was thunderstruck when one mother told her of the practice. She wrote, "A wife bonus, I was told, might be hammered out in a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement and distributed on the basis of not only how well her husband's fund had done, but her own performance, how well she managed the home budget, whether the children got into a good school, the same way their husbands were rewarded at investment banks. In turn, these bonuses were a ticket to a modicum of financial independence and participation in the social sphere, where you don't just go to lunch, you buy a $10,000 table at the benefit lunch that your friend is hosting." I'll just finish with this one. How we're ruled by a cozy elite who all go to the same dinner parties by former Downing Street, Prime Minister's home, people around the world, chief. And it's David Cameron, Prime Minister of Britain's former chief strategist, has launched a stinging attack on the insular ruling class threatening Britain's democracy. He says, regardless of who is in office, the same people are in power. It is a democracy in name only, operating on behalf of a tiny elite, no matter the electoral outcome. And that, just with the smart technologies being a lower level of the core of the control system, this Astral net, that is just describing, an insider describing, a much lower level of imposition of direction of the world through political one-party states, that is a lower level expression of the real core of the control system, which is people in the shadows that you never see, and ultimately entities that don't even exist in the visible light reality that we perceive as the world. Like I say, the alternative media is doing a great job exposing levels of this conspiracy, levels of the human plight. But the real deal is far, far, far deeper than ever most of them can imagine. And unless they start turning their minds to this level, they'll always be on the periphery of what's really happening and where it's coming from, rather than at the cutting edge of it. See you next week. Bye.